My name is Jeremy, and this is Good Beer Matters.
Number one, and my recipe for creating an itinerary is people. I think, whatever your passion is, that's how you should travel. You should travel passionately. They're telling other people and they're spreading the word about a style, about a beer, about a brewery, about a town, a country.
Long ago, a side trip to a pub while traveling was enough. Now, squeezing in a side trip to a museum while beer traveling is commonplace. My next guest is one of these people who put beer travel on the map, and she wants to share with us just how wonderful it is. We find great experiences at the intersection of craft and culture. These are the stories of us, of great food and the beer that brings it all together. For the craft and culture of beer, this is episode 139 of Good Beer Matters with beer traveler Dr. Ruth Berman. Well, welcome back to the Good Beer Matters podcast. This is going to be fun because not only do we get to talk all about beer, we get to talk all about culture, but today we get to talk about going to that culture and experiencing that culture, actually traveling with someone who takes people traveling as a job, as a profession, as a professional. So Dr. Ruth, thank you so much for coming on to the Good Beer Matters podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Just a quick orientation. First of all, we need to find out about you and what you do both in beer and in travel. So lay it on us, if you will.
Okay. So my company that I think we're going to be chatting about today is called Bon Beer Voyage.
Yep.
And we are a beer travel company that we created over a decade ago because we were out traveling on we traveled a lot. We like to travel, but we were on a wine tour and we had done a couple of wine tours and we were on a barge and, it kind of angered me that there was not something similar to wine tourism for people who loved craft beer. I mean, there were definitely, I think back then there were some beer tour companies, but we were on a very nice, experience, this barge with beautiful meals and sightseeing and presentation of the wines and all of this. And it was so lovely. And, Mike, at the time, I really wasn't that much into beer. Mike was into beer. And
Mike is your husband, right?
Mike's my husband and my business partner and has been my business partner in every business for the past 30 years. So he had picked up some beer. I was doing beer tastings on one of the barges. Another time I picked up some beer for him and we ended up doing tastings with the people that were there anyway, even though they were there for wine and whatever else we were there with. We're doing this stuff with the beer. And, I looked at him at one point and said, hey, you know what? We could do this better. We could do it for beer. Let's make this happen. And so we came home and started to talked to the barge company that we had just recently been on, and we started looking at things. And my brother sent me this thing and said, hey, British Airways is having an award for, travel something or whatever. Why do you need some kind of competition? I like things like that. So, of course, I had to get everything done. Boom, 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 boom. Had to have the website up, had to have the tours. I like all of this. I got it done. We won the British Airways business opportunity.
Oh, that's
grant,
fantastic.
Right? It was because there was over 1,000 people entered, and it was great because the whole thing was about face-to-face, why face-to-face meetings are important. And I'm like, they're everything. They're everything because when we put the company together, what I wanted it to be was this experiential thing that when you're going somewhere, when you're traveling, that it's not just, hey, I'm going here. I have a ticket. I want to go in and see this. I'm going somewhere and people know me and I know them and I'm going to learn about them and what they have to offer. And I can't sell that to my guests. I can't offer that to people unless I have it personally. So, one of our big things was we always went out and met with the people, whether it was the restaurants, the brewery, an inn I'm staying with or the barge company I was working with. It's important. It's important to have that connection, because that's just going to make things run more smoothly for your guests and make them feel more welcome and make them feel the experience you're trying to give them. So that's kind of how it started, and it rolled from there. and
Well, about what year was this when you started Bon Beer Voyage?
So officially under the name Bon Beer Voyage, it was 2009. We had, prior to that, been bringing people places, and bringing people to Belgium, bringing people wherever, but not as a tour company. Just like, hey,
Okay.
as our friends, hey, you guys want to go? We'll take you. But I had been working as a travel agent before that. So I was in travel, I don't even know how many years before that, on the side when we were running our chiropractic office, because I love to travel. So I kind of got into that and started working as an agent at an agency outside. And then I went back to school, like we were talking earlier about, getting trained to be a tour director and guide. So I had that by the time we decided to open the company. So 2009, it was that summer. And then I won the grant at the end of the year, and we ran our first official under Bon Beer Voyage tour in 2010 in February. We did a beer safari weekend to Tampa, Florida. And we were the first people to bring an official tour vacation to Cigar City. And it was kind of crazy because we drove up in this big bus, and it wasn't a big group, but that's, it's a whole thing besides buses and coaches and doing that. But anyway, we drove up in this big bus and people are looking at us. And, it was right after Hunapoo, like one of the first Hunapoo days. And we have pictures of the stuff on the blackboard chalked in, and Joey was serving us beer, and it was great. It was great. And then, later that year, we ran our first Belgian barge tour, which was what our focus was always going to be, these, the barge tours. And then, it stemmed out from there. And then we started doing weekends in the States. So we were doing, Tampa, and we were doing, we've done Washington, D.C., we do Asheville.
So not
And
everything is outside the country. So some things
no,
are local, however you want to define local, right?
yeah, I mean, we did even for years, we did it, the Great California Beer Rush Tour, which was San Diego to Santa Rosa in a week. That was intense, intense. Um,
Sounds righteous, dude.
it was, it was, it was kick ass. It was awesome.
That's
Um,
great.
but it's different traveling in and outside of the country. Every town, every place has its own, beer culture, beer people, beer communities. I think I like doing, I like doing local things because I like sharing things here with people. I like bringing people outside of the country because I think it's a service, actually, in a sense that, like, here people are more comfortable traveling, and it's become more common for people to be able to travel within the U.S. on their own to places. There are, there's local tours and things going on. So I think it's easier for people to go on their own, although they're going to get a different experience than they are, so it kind of depends how you like to
Yeah.
travel. But going out of the country, sometimes that's uncomfortable for people. They're worried about speaking the language. They're worried about, even transportation. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to go with a tour company
Yeah. Yeah.
versus
And
on your own, anywhere
yeah,
you
you and
go.
I both know all of that is figure outable, but it is daunting nonetheless. So
Yeah,
you provide that kind of easy route into
yeah,
travel abroad, right?
yeah.
So did I get this right? That you're a chiropractor, right?
I am a chiropractor.
You're a
Mhm.
chiropractor. So how did you go from that to where did beer and travel really start coming in? What's the
Yeah.
origin story of that?
So, yeah, so I love to travel. We love to travel. And I was doing, like I said, we were traveling a lot. And then I started working with this travel agency, doing outside travel stuff for them and taking, groups and doing other things. And then um, I was talking to one of my district reps for one of the high end cruise lines. And I'm like, how did you get into this? And she's like, oh, well, I was working in the corporate world and I was burnt out. And I found out about this tour directing school. And it was like a light bulb went off in my head. I was just like, and I came home and I said to Mike, I'm going back to school. And 2 weeks later, or I don't know, maybe a month later, the day after Thanksgiving, I was on a plane out to um, San Francisco to go to this tour directing school. And then I came out, and surprisingly, and at the time, like I drank beer, but nothing. I wasn't. It was Mike's thing. Mike was like, he was the beer guy. He was big into like, he belonged to Michael Jackson's, beer club and all this stuff, and it was his thing. And Belgium was his place. Like, I was a Francophile, and he's like, I'm like, we got to go to France, and he's like, no, we got to go to Belgium. I'm like, all right, and yeah, so I did this thing, and I came out, and I went to school thinking this is great. I'll be able to go to Europe, and people will pay me to run these, tours, and I'll get to go. But I didn't realize like how the system works. If you're working for companies, like if you're doing like European stuff and things, a lot of time you're signing on to a company for, months at a time. And I'm like, I don't have kids or anything at home, but I got a husband, I got my dad living up the street at the time and whatever, and I got to take care of people. I can't be gone for months at a time by myself.
Yeah.
And so strangely enough, for a couple who did not have kids on purpose, I ended up doing student tours. And that's how I got into like really like doing all this. So I was doing student tours, and all over the East Coast mostly. And
sorry, I just imagine, all right, hey, here, kid, here's how you really drink a beer.
right, well, no.
You gotta
But
learn
what
sometime.
happened is, if you think about this, almost every 7th and 8th grader in the U.S. for their class trip, they go to Washington, D.C.
Yep.
So I was doing these trips. I'm a licensed guide in D.C., whatever. But let me tell you something. And it's a very nice community of tour guides and tour directors. Like we all know each other, just like we do within the beer world. And, after a week or even 5 days of being nonstop with a busload or 2 or 3 busloads of 13-year-old kids, you need a beer. So so I started, getting everybody together, like who's off tonight. So they'd text each other and say, hey, who's off tonight? Let's go out and have a beer. And I learned all the great beer places in Washington, D.C. And, anyway, so I had this in my head. I'm like, I need to do something. And Mike and I are traveling. I'm like, we need to do something with beer and travel. We need to do something with beer and travel. And like, it was fermenting. And then, like I said, we were on these tours, and the second round of barge tours that we were on, I had gone out. We were in France, and the last day before we went onto the barge, I went to a market at 8:00 in the morning, because they have these great markets in Europe. I don't know if you know, and they sell everything. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like looking for some kind of cool souvenir to take onto the ship, and I find a brewer. And the brewery is called La Croix de Rat, the Cross of the Rat. I don't know. And he's got a couple of bottles out there, and like, some malt all over the table, whatever, and stuff. And at the time, like I drank whatever Mike put in front of me. I was not, real swift on beer at the time. I just, I knew I like stuff, but I said, well, maybe I'll bring my bottle of beer back. So it's 8:00 in the morning, and I am doing a degustation. These beers, and they were all good. So I bought them all, and I brought them back and shoved them into the little, European tiny car that we had with us to get to the barge, and they barely fit. And we brought them onto the barge, and it was a bike and barge tour. So every day we're out biking, and we did picnic lunch, and we had the beers in the refrigerator, and then we bring them in a cooler with us. And every day at lunch, Mike would pour a little glass out for everybody and do a beer tasting for them. And, then we're traveling around, and then the guide, who was the bike guide, was leading us around. He's like riding, and we're going through some towns that were cool and some towns that were not so cool. And I'm like, It would be more interesting if we made like a stop, like a bar or something, and like we find a bar on the side of the road, and I go over and it's closed, and I bang on the door till they opened up for us. We all go in, we're playing foosball, we're drinking beers, it's good, and it was like, we kind of took things over, and I just looked at Mike. I said, like I said before, this is it. We can do this. We can do it better. We could do it for beer. This is what we're
Well,
going to do. This is what we're
and
going to do.
bless you, because I think of some years ago we went to Spain. We were in Barcelona, and we went on with this tour guide who took us to a monastery, and that was great. He took us to this winery, and the winemaker came out, and we tasted the wine, had some snacks, and he told us stories about the wine and the land and it was so it was story time
Yes.
with wine, and it was fantastic, and that was cool. I love wine. I'm just a beer guy, so that was cool. And later on in that trip, we were on the island of Mallorca, and we went to the northern part to a town called Soller, and that was where. And I've been having a bunch of beers from Spain and from the rest of Europe, but they were all macro produced, good, but they were all the big stuff. And in this town, Soya, we actually found some beers from a local brewery called Suya Rica. And actually had a couple different beers. They were kind of farmhouse style, still had a bunch of yeast, a lot of terroir, a lot of flavor, a lot of interest. They were craft brewed. It was a small producer, and it was interesting. And I kept thinking, why don't we have a tour guide that takes us to a place like this? Because along this whole town of Soyer, you have this just beautiful beach. There's a trolley that goes from one side to the other because it's a long beach. You have yachts out in the harbor and just beautiful, great food. It's like I want to come here for a tour like that, and so I had that thought while I was on that trip, but of course I didn't take it any further, much like you did. But that's exactly what that's for. Is I want to experience this place through the flavor, and it's just extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, that's what, I mean, culinary travel is a thing. I mean, there's a couple of different organizations, there's World Food Travel Association, there's another global culinary association that this is big. This has become huger and huger over the years that people are traveling. People travel. I mean, when you go on a vacation, what do you go on a vacation for? When you go on a vacation, you're looking for the breweries. Right? I mean, people like us do that. We plan a vacation, we're going somewhere, and like, oh, we're here at the beer fest, we're here for the brewery, we're here in Italy, we found this is my first beer fest, this is my first this, whatever, because that's the way we travel. And a lot of people do. They travel for wine, they travel for beer, they travel to take cooking classes. Um, you can go tick a list. Like when I was doing those
Yeah.
student tours, right, in DC, there was some companies I worked for at the time that it was tick the list, and that to me was sad. That's you want to be able to know what a place is like. You can open a library book, you can watch a video, and you can see things, but how do you experience them? And we're all they used to talk about, are you a kinesthetic person, are you this or whatever, and so
Hmm.
um, you know there's different ways to experience places. I have another passion, that's drawing. I'm an urban sketcher, and so I travel. I have the best of all possible worlds because, I was in Belgium last week, and I sat there with a beer on the table and my sketch pad, and I'm sketching. I'm, drinking an Orval and sketching the scene in front of me, and
With
I'm
the ear to
seeing
ear
it.
smile.
That's it. I mean, I'm seeing it through this, like, okay, now I'm looking at it this way through this, but I'm also looking at it this way. And I think, whatever your passion is, that's how you should travel. You should travel passionately and find those things where you go, whatever it is, whether it's beer or anything.
Uh, so I remember years ago working at that same Italian restaurant that we talked about offline. I had a fantastic a restaurant manager who shared something that has stuck with me forever and has become even more poignant now that I'm working in beer. But he said, people go out to eat for two reasons. One is to have an experience you cannot recreate at home, and the second is to avoid doing the dishes, right? And that completely applies to travel as well. You could go on a vacation where you have an experience, a mind life expanding experience, or you could go to those all inclusive places so you can sleep until whenever you're darn good and ready to get up, go out, pull out your book, get one of those fruity drinks with an umbrella in it, and you know whatever
Yeah,
all of that is fantastic. But we're talking about the experience type of vacation. Now, from my experience, I do like having a down day where I can just sit and rest and put my feet up a little bit. But to do something, to travel with intention, to travel passionately, like you said, to have to it's like I can go get a T-shirt or a beer as a souvenir, bring it home, but what's even more profound are those memories and that experience that changes how I live my life from here on out. To me, I find that extremely profound and extremely desirable. And it seems like that's where you're taking this whole idea of passionate beer travel. Is that fair?
I'd say so. I think I say I'm gonna, I don't know if I should admit this or not, but beer beer is not the most important thing about my travel. When I choose a place, when I choose something, beer is very important. Beer has to be, without question, has to be good, interesting, delicious, all of that. People, number one in my recipe for creating an itinerary is people. Number two is the story. Number three is the product, beer, whatever it is. Um, I mean, they're all intertwined, and the beer is going to be a indirect, what's the word I'm looking for? Correlation to the people behind it. But what makes a beer interesting? What makes, I mean, being there and drinking in a locale, certainly being in the sense of place, that your surroundings obviously affect your experience. um, if you're drinking a German beer out in a beer garden, and it's beautiful, whatever, I mean, that in itself is, and drinking things fresh, right?
Yeah.
But when you can find out about, and I'm not talking about like how it's made, like, everybody has a beer tour, every brewery, no matter big or small, whatever, the tour is at 2 o'clock or whatever it is. In fact, when I set up stuff with a new brewery, if maybe you haven't worked with them before, I'll always say, if we're doing a tour, I do visits. Sometimes I do tours, sometimes I just do visits, depending where they are. I don't need the 4 ingredients of beer tour.
Yeah. At some point, we've seen enough stainless steel in our life. What else you got? Right.
Exactly. What else you got is really where it's at, because people don't need to come with me to do that. They don't need to come with me to go to a brewery to do something they can do on their own. So, if I'm providing a tour in a brewery that doesn't do tours to regular individuals, if I'm bringing them to see something that's done differently, then it's interesting to see your brewery. But I want to know why your beer is special. I want to know, you know, what's different about you? What's cool about your brewery? What's the story? Why do you make beer? Why did you make this beer? And why is this beer even called this? Or why is this brewery called this? And what's the history behind it? And, granted, in Europe, there's breweries with, generations old stories we have to tell, which is wonderful. And some of them have amazing equipment to look at that's old and historic, and that's cool as well. But there's some new breweries that are cool, but they just have a different story maybe that they're telling. And so yeah, I mean, like you said, we've all seen that. I mean, most people who come with me have been around the world with me. We have a very high repeat passenger rate, so you know they know. A lot of them, like you said, are home brewers or
Yeah.
professional brewers or beer writers or whatever.
Yeah.
And the other people are just so passionate about beer, they've probably drank more beer than you and I have going around to festivals and wherever they go. So it has to be what's different, what's unique, and so you have that story there, what's unique and what's cool, and in your surroundings, and you have these people, and when you have these people that are so like love what they love what they do, and they're you know and you hear them like talk about this or that or whatever, and or talk about their family or how all of it's that's what's cool. That's what's cool, and that's what they bring back, and that's what people bring back with them. And you said, you're creating this experience, that goes out into all different. That's they have an experience and they remember and they have these memories. And maybe if they're a brewer or something, they're like, oh, I'm going to go back and I'm going to try and create a beer like this because I like this and I like, oh, they did this and this is different. I'm going to do this, but
Yeah.
um, you know, it also serves a whole different purpose that you wouldn't think, and that beer tourism is important to to spread the news about a brewery, to share, to promote a brewery. Even if you think about this and you say, okay, I mean, even now, like how many breweries we have in the States compared to what we did back when I started doing what I'm doing. Um, it's hard for people to know about. You can't keep up with it. You can't keep up and know every
Yeah.
brewery that's out there.
Yeah.
But if they're, and a
Sure.
lot of breweries here are like, this is our area and this is where people know about us, whatever. But if you're trying to get your stuff further out there, what tells the story? Who's telling your story for you? Somebody goes to a brewery and they have this amazing experience. Hey, we met the brewer and you wouldn't believe what he did with this beer. And this was, oh my God. And this, and then they come home and they tell their friends. And then when they see that beer on the menu, they're like, oh, that's from so and so. And oh my God, we're going to drink this beer because this was amazing. And we were here. And do you know what else we know about this town? And it's, they're ambassadors. Now they're ambassadors for the brewery. And they're telling other people and they're spreading the word about a style, about a beer, about a brewery, about a town, a country, whatever it is. So it carries on. It carries on. But you have to have the people behind it, because if there's no people, there's no stories and there's no beer. I don't
Well,
know.
and I find to build that loyal base of fans, not customers, but of fans, of
Yeah.
raging fans.
Yeah.
Having a good product, a good beer, uh, with a purpose is also a nice little thing. But to have that story behind it, that's what kind of coalesces and coagulates and everything, the idea in our brain. That's, for me, that's what turns people from customers to fans. um you kind of made me think about too. I think about beer, and by extension food, or we could even just call it collectively as flavor. But to me, flavor is to travel as a soundtrack is to a movie. We could go travel, we could watch a movie without a soundtrack, but that would suck. What how good is that movie really if there's no soundtrack, if there's no
Yeah.
music, if there's no, kind of building of that tension and that resolution, and having that flavor go along with travel? To me, those are one and the same. And I remember years ago, a nice restaurant that I worked at in the summertime, we had a travel group that came through every single week, and they were actually a cycling tour group, and they would travel all throughout the circuit. But they had contracted with our restaurant so that when they got into our town, they would clean up. They're all in their cycling kits for the duration of the trip, but they brought one nice outfit just to come visit our restaurant. We had
Awesome.
a nice long table. We put out drinks and appetizers, and then gave them just an incredible meal, incredible experience. And we've got feedback from this tour company that that was their favorite day of their entire cycling tour trip, was going and having that time sitting around a big table and talking, telling stories with great food and great drink. And it's hard to find hard data to prove this point, but the anecdotal evidence is everywhere. And this is one of the things that, if you want to create something out of not nothing, but create something better out of something ordinary, add a story, add a flavor
Oh yeah.
track to the experience, right?
That's what people talk about. That's what they bring home with them. That's what they remember, these things. I have we try to have things like that on every tour. Like everything to me, every day is like a great day. And whenever we're doing our itineraries and running through them, like a few months before, we're always like reconfirming everything and talking through it. And I look through the itineraries and I'm like, oh my God, this is so great. I forgot how great this was. And then because I'm thinking through my head what we're going to and what the guests are going to experience and the brewers are
Yeah.
going to meet and the people they're going to meet and the things they're going to do. And but they have, and there's certain things that there's just stories go over and over, and people talk about a trip, a certain itinerary we do, and then they'll talk about the place with the steak, or the place with the guy with we have a brewer we visit on my Belgium and France tour, and he makes a beer. The town he lives in is called Gotham, and he makes a beer called the Virgin of Gotham, the Mac de Gotham. And if I'm pronouncing that right in Flemish, probably not, but they all have a little female hop cone inside the bottle, and when you open it up, it gushes out, and it's a shtick. But he'll
Yeah.
sit there and
Yeah.
take the bottle and he'll do this and it's like people have videos of that thing that they're and they just remember that they're like how's Dr. Canaris, like he's got a whole persona, and it's his thing. And all his beers are good, and they all have different stories behind them. He has, the Potter's one, and he has a little special mug for that. That's like pottery mug, and he's got these different things, and he's just, it's a little town that nobody'd ever know about. And in fact, way back when, he billed himself as the smallest brewery in Belgium because he had just a little tiny place. And now, of course, he's grown over the years, but he still comes out and he explains the beers and he does this thing, and it's just fun. It's just fun, and having fun, and just, it doesn't have to be so serious all the
Yeah.
time.
But
Um,
but what you're describing is something that's not only fun, but therefore, but it's also memorable because to me that's the souvenir. Because I could go to
exactly.
the water park down from my house and have some fun, but I may not remember it 10 years from now. But the souvenir I'm going to take home with me is that memory of like, oh my gosh,
Yeah,
I need to tell you about this. How cool is that?
that's it. The
Right?
stories, the stories.
That's
It's
the
creating,
stories.
creating the experience is creating memories, and what are you going to remember? Are you going to remember exactly what that beer tasted like? No, you're going to remember you liked it, but you're not going to. But
Yeah.
you're going to remember how fun it was, or how much you liked it, or how the pairing was, if you're doing one of these amazing pairings, right? And you're like, oh my God, 1 and 1 makes 3 kind of thing,
Yeah.
like this is mind blowing, right? That's the kind of things you want to be able to give to people.
Yeah.
That's why you should travel. That's what you should get when you're traveling. Don't wait in line to
Perfect.
see Mona Lisa. There's a really great beer bar not far. I can say.
That's you must have been eavesdropping in my house. I think it was last night or the night before. I was talking to my wife about that. We were talking about travel, and when I go travel, I've the older I've gotten, the more focused I've become. I'm a waterman. I'm a beer lover. I'm a food lover. I love music. And the idea of like, okay, I've been to the Uffizi in Florence. I've seen the Statue of David, and that is a must see. I'm sure going to the Louvre is a must see. I've seen the Sistine Chapel; it's a must see.
Nope.
But
Been there, done that.
frankly, but there are times when you go see this this world famous piece of art or something like that, and you're like, oh, is that all? and but there's some that blew me away and were 10 times what I thought they'd be.
Yeah.
David, seeing Pablo Picasso's Guernica. I mean, these are things that I just stand in front of for an hour trying to wrap my head around it. But a lot of these things, like, okay, I checked that off my list. Time to hit the pub.
Don't need to do it again. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I want to be near the water. I want to have some good food. I want to have some good drink, and I want to do stuff that has some like great stories. I want to go to not the obvious things that you want to
Yeah.
go to, but the things that, oh, I didn't know that even existed. Let's go there.
Right.
Those.
Those are the best. I didn't. That's key. I didn't even know that existed. Where are we going? I don't know. I trust you to take me there, and
Yeah. but it takes someone like you who knows. It's like, "Okay, yes, if you wanna go to the Louvre, you can go stand in line, but I've got a better idea. Follow me." That's the stuff that
Yeah,
we really ought to pay good money for because that's the hard stuff to find. Um, so before so don't let me forget, at the very end of this, I wanna make sure we talk about your recent trip to Belgium. That's gonna be the capstone of our conversation. Um but before we go there, I think about, okay, here we are in the US and we think about all the beer cultures. I want to go to England. I want to go to Germany. I want to go to Belgium. Even France has an unexpected and delightful beer culture, as I'm sure a lot of countries do. Where do people in Europe go for beer travel that's not in their backyard? I
yeah.
mean, inadvertently, where are the hot spots around the world that are worth traveling to for beer?
They come here. It's really funny because in the last, I guess, in mostly in August, I'd say a lot of our friends and people we know from like Belgium, the Netherlands, France, they're all here. They were like going up and down the East Coast. They were in Maine. They were in Florida. They were all over the place. They go out west. Um, some of them have been to places I've never been to. They come here. They love the States. It's funny because when we first started traveling over there, a lot of people and down here in South Florida, there's a big group of people who are Belgian fans, right?
Mhm.
And they want to brew, and they do. There's breweries that are Belgian style breweries and brewing that kind of style. And we went over and we were doing these itineraries and we're meeting brewers and they were brewing. This was the thing, the West Coast IPAs. They wanted to do what we're doing. We want to do what they're doing. And it was kind of a funny thing. I mean, from everywhere. And I was, like breweries we were at. This is our West Coast IPA. Taste this. What do you think? I was at a beer festival in Paris one year, and there was a brewer from Germany, and she's like, "Oh, would you like to taste my West Coast IPA?" It's like it's funny that this is. So I think they come here. You know, it's America.
Well, and that's fair. I mean, I grew up in California, lived in Oregon for 20 years, and basically I'm a West Coaster, and of course I've seen the tourists come because you want to go to the West Coast. They want to see San Francisco. They want to go to San Diego. They
Mhm.
want to go to LA and see,
Colorado.
and in
Yeah,
Colorado. They want
yeah.
to go to these places because especially. I mean, I grew up, what, an hour and a half from Disneyland. We went there a couple times a year because,
Right. Like
it was
nothing.
so
It's like
close,
us
but
in Disney World, right?
people travel from all around the world just to go to Disneyland. It's just so that all makes sense. But when in the context of beer, of course, we back in the day, we pulled all of our beer influence from Europe and then made everything our own.
Yeah.
And these days, and I like you, I have the opportunity to talk to people all around the world. Everyone's trying to recreate that West Coast American IPA, but in Germany, in Ukraine, in France, and just like we were trying to brew European beers without the authentic ingredients,
Right.
they're using what they have available and
Right.
thereby creating new sub styles. And this is the
Yeah.
part I find so interesting.
I think sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
And I think I like the brewers. Some of the brewers I visit are like, you know what? I brew what I like. I brew what I like to drink, and I love that. I love that when they're just like, if it sells and everybody likes it, great. But I like it, so that's what matters to me. And I think that's cool. You know.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like I don't travel to the other side of the world to drink IPAs necessarily. Um, but sometimes, you find something interesting like the virgin beer I was telling you about. It's an
Yeah.
IPA, so.
That's why when I go to a new place, I don't ask them, and I don't know what to order, either food or beer. I never ask them, what's most popular. I don't want to eat or drink um, your bestseller. So I always ask them, what do you eat? What do you drink when you're not working? What does the brewer drink? What does the
Right,
brewer recommend?
right,
Something
right.
something like that, because I want, there are those beers that pay the electric bills, and then
Yeah.
there's the beers that the brewer makes because, okay, the electric bill is paid, now I get to play.
Right. I do what I
Those are the
like.
beers I want,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
some what other places around the world are becoming known, or are becoming on your, or getting on your radar as places to explore in terms of beer and food outside of the usual suspects?
well, France, I don't know if you consider that starting to become it. For me, for years, I've wanted to share the fact that France has a great beer culture.
Hmm.
And, Paris has a pretty good beer scene, surprisingly. And I finally, after years of talking about it, I finally ran a tour last year. We did a Paris Cognac Bordeaux tour.
Mm.
So Paris for beer, and cognac for cognac, and Bordeaux for wine. But even in Bordeaux, like we found some really awesome brewers there. And I think, everywhere, I think everywhere now, you just got to know where to go. You just got to know where to go. I mean, the really cool stuff that was going on, in Paris, one of the breweries, which I heard he left, he's leaving them. So, but it's really sad. Um, he was making weirs, wine beers.
Mm.
And I'm going to tell you something. Every one of them, we went through like 12 bottles of them with him, and everyone was fantastic. And I mean, and the people that were with me are you know, they're not necessarily, they're beer people. They're beer people before they're wine people. They went on this because they wanted to see what we had to bring out there. And, you know, they'll drink some wine, and they've been with me to the south of France for wine, but the beer was why they were there on this thing. And, it was great. It was great. And there's a really great beer and beer bar, and right across from it they own a restaurant, and they do pairings, which is fabulous to see. There needs to be more of that in the world. That's a shortfalling in the beer world, but there needs to be
Well,
more of
you'll
that.
be happy to hear I'm doing my part to try and proliferate the whole beer and food pairing thing, because that's just the next level.
Well, we did I tell you what we did? I don't know if you know this. We did on my, I do these trips in Provence in the summer where I joke that I cheat on beer with wine, and but we usually find some beer things. So um, I when I was setting it up, I was touring with the tourism board, takes us around, and they bring us to this Michelin starred restaurant, and they bring the chef out, and they go, "Here's a chef. He's from Belgium." I was like, and then I was like, "Have you ever done any beer pairings? This and that, whatever, blah blah blah." Long story short, it took me like talking with the company who owned the restaurant, and this and the people in the tourism office for them, and all this back and forth. And I ran this summer what I think might have been the first of its kind Michelin starred beer versus wine dinner.
Oh, oh,
And
amazing.
yeah, so 5 courses, and so they set it up, and they own a winery too. So we had spent the afternoon at the winery doing a blending course and all this, and then we went back to our chateau. We got changed. We went back to the restaurant, and before it was done, they had sent me over the menu. Now, usually when I do a pairing dinner, I taste beforehand. I go and taste and whatever. I at least know what the heck I'm talking about. And I
Yeah.
speak French, but I got to tell you, this menu, I was, what is this stuff? And they sent it over to me. And I was actually in Italy, so that I had a Zoom with them and with the chef and the sous chef, and like, so we're going through the menu. Okay, what kind of beers? What are we going to do with this? But he had he has a restaurant in Belgium now. He used to have a 2-star Michelin that he got tired of and closed. And but anyway, he's back in Brussels with another restaurant, and so we're talking on the Zoom and going through the things. Well, let's just do Belgian beers because we're here. We could bring them over, and because we don't know, in France we know where to get some beer and some, but you don't know exactly what's available near. In Chateauneuf, it was in Chateauneuf-du-Pape too. I don't know if I told
Okay.
you that. So now I'm
Yeah.
bringing the
Wine
beer in,
country.
so it's
Yeah.
like wine capital, and I am bringing the beer in. So yeah, it was great, and I kind of do that a lot there now that I think about it. But that's another. Anyway, so yeah, so we went over the whole menu. We came up with the pairings, and we brought it was all Belgians. So it's all Belgians, and then all French wines. So Belgian beers, French wines, all the way through. We voted on every pairing, and in the end, it was a tie. It was a tie. Yeah.
So therefore, everyone won who was
Yeah.
there to taste it,
Yeah. It was all, I
drink it.
mean, but amazing, like these flavors together. And you're like, there really is something to be said about like Michelin, you think, but I've eaten at 2 Michelin restaurants in the past 6 months, I'd say. And when you get that kind of flavor thing going on in your mouth and you're just like, holy mackerel, this is just, you know, shooting off things in my brain. Like what's going on here? Like, it's different than like, that you could have great meals and like home cooked stuff. That's so like, this is so delicious. And I love this. And then there's something different about whatever they're doing with these things. I don't know, but it was great. And it was awesome when you have like, when you get these pairings that are so amazing. I mean, it was like, well, we like this better than this, but it wasn't because this was bad. It was just because this was better, you know? And trying to explain to these people about, the other people when we're talking them into why beer is better with food 90% of the time than wine, but that's a whole other, you know.
And frankly, I absolutely believe that. But if I have to suffer through another beer and wine dinner, I'm absolutely willing.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like,
So
yeah. So I
we're
gotta.
already booked for next year for doing it, because that was one of those things that people were like, holy cow, I can't believe that, this is happening. Right.
So what if you were to deconstruct that experience? What are the bits and pieces that made that so special?
Place. We were in, that tour is a very luxe. I mean, we stay in a chateau in the middle of a vineyard just outside of Châteauneuf-du-Pape. The people, always the people, because the people that were on my tour. I think everyone that was there with us, except maybe one, had traveled with us before for beer. So we know that they like wine, but they're passionate about beer. So that was interesting. The food, things unexpected, unexpected. We ate pigeon. I
Mm,
didn't know this was a thing. It's a thing, pigeon. It's a thing. And there's a whatever. That's a whole other. But it was it was like a cross between a filet mignon and a duck breast. I don't know.
interesting.
And we had it, whatever. I don't remember exactly how they prepared it, but I'm pretty sure we had it paired with the beer. Was the Duchess de Bourgogne.
Hmm.
It was just, so it was, the place we were in. You're in Provence. It's beautiful. You're outside overlooking, whatever, and they're pouring here and they're presenting it, and the courses, and just to sit, relax, enjoy the flavors of Provence with, uh, you know, fabulous beverages, and trying to experience it more than just eating the food, but trying the food with this, with that. How do you elevate this to a different level? Um, and kind of having background on everything there, because we had been spending a week, visiting wineries and things with people. And we had also traveled with them, through Belgium for beer. So I think it was a lot, it was everything that was, I don't know.
So
You have
I
to
have
come,
to
you have to come next year and find out.
twist my arm. I dare you. Um, you know, one little bit of logistics that I'm thinking about though is the idea of going and eating and drinking all day every day doesn't sound awful, but yeah, at some point, like, okay, I'm full. What do you do in
You're not.
between meals
You're not.
with your
This is
tours?
it. You're right. You can't. You can't. If you see my tagline for myself, I call myself the BBB, the brains beyond the beer.
Hmm.
When Mike and I started the company, he's like, "Yeah, we got to visit this brewery, this brewery." I'm like, "That's nice, but we need beyond the beer. We need to
Yeah.
see some, because again, yeah, you're going to a country and you're saying you want to experience it through the taste, but you also want to see, you do want to see those
Oh
things that
yeah.
are that make it beautiful. So,
I don't mind
in,
seeing the Sistine Chapel. It was
that's
lovely.
right.
You know?
That's exactly. So, in Belgium, um, we do tours. I have guides, so private tours of like the cities. We do a great tour in Ypres, and then we visit the Flanders Fields Museum on that itinerary. Um, so we're doing different cities, different towns. On one of my itineraries, we visit a cheese farm in the Netherlands.
Oh, cool.
And that's, and it's not one of these big, it's really funny because it's down this road that I never get the same bus driver to work with me twice on that itinerary because these canals on the sides of it, and you're going on this big bus down this like thing, and they're like, "We're not going to make it down there." I'm like, "You are," and I always have them call the woman who owns the cheese farm, and she'll say, "Walk there," because you have big milk trucks coming through there. But
Yeah, yeah.
it's the bus takes up the whole road and then this canal, so we'll be driving down there to get to this place, and one time there were cars parked on the road, and like I had to go out and like bang on people's doors to get them to, we were gonna have to go out and move the cars to get the thing down there. Another time we were coming back and there's a big milk truck coming at us. The milk truck backed up a mile down this road, like to let us, because it's what it is. It's what it
Oh
is.
my goodness. That's
But
funny.
she's fabulous, and it's like family run, and so again, the people, the experiences, they love this, they love what they do, and so yeah, I mean, you have to do whatever, what's what do you want to see, what's there to, we're doing a tour. What are we doing? We're doing this beer and chocolate thing now. So this is a new itinerary, and but we're doing walking tours. We're doing the museums. It's great. There's great museums in Belgium for chocolate frites, everything. But it's really nice. There's two museums that we're using, and one of them kind of tells the whole story of chocolate all the way through, and the other one talks about chocolate in Belgian chocolates, and the families behind, just like there are behind the breweries. There's families behind these chocolate makers that are also famous, So, there's just different places have different interesting things to sights to see, and whatever the experience is going to be, we're going to go find it and do it. So
That's great. Um, so I said I wanted to make sure we save this trip or this story for last before we wind down, and we're getting close to winding down. Tell us about your recent trip to Belgium. What did you do? And you tell the story. It's your story.
my story. Well, what did I do, or why did I go? Why did I go? It was an
Yeah.
unexpected until a few months ago trip. I went to Belgian Beer Weekend in Brussels because I was knighted by the knighthood of the Brewers Master. Um,
Congratulations.
thank you.
And for those who are probably thinking, say what? What is that? What exactly is that, and the significance of that?
So it's it the knighthood is come down from the guild, and the guild is like one of the oldest guilds around, the Brewers Guild, and basically there's people from the breweries, the generation to generations, they're like knights by right, I guess, and then there's people that are honorary knights, and those are people who have served the Belgian beer culture, like helped promote Belgian beer culture. So people who are writers, or people like me, I bring people over, but I also do, tastings, and I do promotions at festivals and things, sharing the love of Belgian beer, I guess. So it's amazing because, the whole weekend started out where they do the blessing of the beer, and there's a mass in the church. And, I mean, Belgians take their beer probably more seriously than anybody in the world. But the funny thing is, they're like, I always think of the Belgians. I don't want to say the jokers, but they're fun. They're the fun people, right? But they're serious in a fun way, right? They're
Yeah.
serious about their beer, and so they had the mass, and we were invited to that, which was great. There's parades, and there's they did a knighting of some people who were like Belgians during the first thing and meetings, and then they did that was Friday, and then we got to go to the festival. Um, and all the breweries are out there, and there, I mean, trumpets blaring, the whole. I mean, it was like awesome. And then on Saturday they did the knighting. They knighted, I think, 19 of us, and there was a couple of Americans, which was great.
I was gonna say
And
there's probably not very many Americans. I can think of Garrett Oliver, and that's where my list ends.
it's few. Less in May, uh, we did a whole Belgium comes to America thing in Florida and in DC. And the brewers came over and they did some events for industry, and then they did a big beer festival in DC, and they did a knighting at the ambassador's house. And so Suzanne Shallow, do you know Suzanne
No.
from the Craft Beer Cellar franchise? She's
Uh, okay,
maybe,
actually, no, that's ringing a bell. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Greg from the Sovereign and all those restaurants, Greg Engert from DC.
Mhm.
There's some different people from, some whatever, but there were some people there that got knighted at the Belgian ambassador's house. That was pretty cool. Um, so anyway, yeah, so there are some Americans that, because listen, let's face it, here in America, we do love Belgian beer.
Mhm.
There's some of us anyway, and those that do are pretty passionate about it and like to share it. And it's nice that they recognize that, um, you know, and it's pretty cool. It was just, I mean, you go through your life and you think this, you're going to grow up, I'm going to grow up and be a doctor, blah, 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 whatever you're going to be, whatever. And I did all that. And then, I always say, I never thought that I'd be spending my time taking people around the world to drink beer. And I certainly never thought I'd be up there and somebody taking a brewer's paddle and, it was
Well,
crazy.
and the thing is, it's like now you could like not bother telling people you're a doctor anymore. You can say I'm a knight.
A dame,
And
a dame.
because some people are like, "Oh, you're a doctor. Oh, well, right
Yeah,
on.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
exceptional." But oh,
It's cool,
you're a
but
knight.
I
That's
know. I think much more people think that's cooler than yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I have to
because there are a
say,
lot more people who are doctors than there are knights. So that is something that's a story that you
yeah,
could share around the table
yeah.
after a couple of beers.
It's uh, it's awesome. It's awesome.
Well,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank
I
you.
thank you for sharing that. And I'm so glad that we decided to schedule this interview after you came back from that trip because that it just makes for a better thing. But to wind down and be respectful of your time, I've just got a few quick questions for you that you may take longer answers, but that's up to you. Tomorrow, uh, Dr. Berman and Knight of the Mash Paddle, you are now going to become queen of the beer world for an entire day.
Where's my tea?
What is one thing you would change? What one thing you would change about beer in the world?
Um, well, maybe what we were talking about before about the restaurants. I think I would make it so that restaurants everywhere became more aware that beer is a better or as good as depends thing to pair and have availability of beer on the menus and educate the staff to do that and bring that in and make it
Yeah.
happen. I think that would be something that would be worthwhile. Yeah.
For all the younger people today who are just entering beer culture, drinking culture, the world of flavor culture, uh, there's a lot of stats out now that they're drinking less, not drinking at all, they're drinking seltzers and stuff that yeah, I'm biased, but I will say does not inspire me like beer does. So, what advice would you have for younger people who are kind of entering this culture today?
I'd say, listen, I always say drink what you like. In the end, you should drink what you like. I think maybe the people that are drinking all that other stuff are drinking, what is your reason for drinking? What is your reason for, are they drinking because they want to buzz? Are they drinking because they're looking to pair with something? Are they drinking as a social, lubricant? Are they drinking because they're trying to learn about a product? I mean, I think we can't tell them what to drink or whatever, but if they're looking to learn about craft beer and the culture that goes beyond, with it, then travel to places, talk to people, go to the breweries and the tap rooms and try things. Try things. That's it. Be open to trying different things. There's so many people, and I don't know if you talk to younger people or whatever, that even older people our age or my age, I don't know your age, but whatever, that
I've
say
got
I
some
don't,
gray in my beard.
I don't drink. I don't like beer. You don't like beer. What you need to try beer. Like I think all of us that are in craft beer have this again, and you try to like do it nicely. But I was in Fire Island, right on my way to Belgium, and visit some friends there that have a home there. I've never been over there before, and there's a bunch of guys in the house, and all of them are like, oh, we don't drink beer.
Yeah. I think it's funny when I hear someone, typically someone older, says, "Well, I'm a wine drinker. I don't care
Right.
much for beer unless I'm watching a game and I'll have a banquet or something like that." I always want to just kind of pull them aside and say, "You go talk to your winemaker and find out whatever he or she drinks. I'll bet you there's some good beers on that list."
Yeah.
Right?
Well, well, what we did was these guys, we did a beer tasting for them. We called the local shop, and how you have to ferry it over to Fire Island. And I ordered Belgian beers. I ordered like whatever Belgians they had on the shelf. I said, send them all over. And they sent them on the ferry the next day, chilled them out. And we did a beer tasting. Then we did a beer and chocolate pairing for them. And all of a
Yeah,
sudden they're like,
awesome.
oh, I'll finish that bottle. I like this, And I was like,
Awesome. Um, one other quick question, or a couple more questions for you before we go, but I think this one is important and unique to you in this particular episode. But do you have just a couple pieces of advice to beer travelers or people who want to start beer traveling around the world?
sure.
And the obvious one would be to sign up for one of your classes. So I'll take that off the table. What other advice do you
No.
have?
Well, no, that's not. Here's the thing. It's not necessarily because my tours are not necessarily for everybody. I think the first thing is if you're going to travel, whether it's for beer or whatever it is, you need to know what kind of traveler you are. Are you someone who likes to be really active? Do you want to bike? Do you want to hike? Do you want to do this? Do you want to? Are you a foodie? Do you want something that the food is important? Or do you want something that's just like, hey, we're taking you to, this brewery and this brewery today, and then you're free the rest of the time, do whatever you want? Or do you want things planned out for you? What you need to kind of think yourself before you go looking at other things. What kind of traveler are you, and what do you like to do? Because that's how you find the company that's right for you. You know, um, Granted, there's a lot of breweries in Belgium. There's certain places people want to visit, and you can get to a lot of places with different tour operators. But how do you want to do that? We love that we do, on the barge for us because you're unpacking, you're there, and we take you everywhere and bring it back, and we have great chefs and it's food and all of that. But that's not for everybody. There's people that want to go out and just, I'm having frites for dinner. I'd rather spend the time sitting in the guard drinking the triple, and
Yeah.
I mean, we have time for that, but that may be how you want to spend your afternoon. So that's okay. So you need to, I think the most important thing is know what kind of traveler you are. The next thing is for all travelers, beer or not, I can't stress this enough. I don't even know. I own a travel agency as well as a tour company.
Okay.
And I see
Good
this
to know.
trip insurance. Trip insurance. If you're going to Europe or you're going out of the country, 90% of health insurance do not pay for stuff outside of the US. If you're lucky enough to have a company like that, great. But the thing is, crap happens. Stuff happens, however you want to say it. And nowadays, travel's not as easy as it used to be with flights and this and that and whatever. Cover your butt. It's worth it. Um, Best ideas. What else do I need to tell you about going on a
No,
trip?
no,
I mean,
that's
oh,
perfect. That's perfect.
and On my website, there's an article called To Ship or to Schlep on my blog. To Ship or to Schlep is read through that and have plans on how you're going to bring back your stuff, because inevitably you are not going to go to Belgium or Germany or anywhere and not be coming home with bottles.
Yeah. Well, a quick story. On my way home from Spain, I did schlep a number of bottles, most of which made it. But luckily, I had the wherewithal to think, I'm going to put these bottles inside a sock so that if they did break, all the big pieces are going to be fairly contained. And one bottle was sacrificed to the travel gods, and luckily all the big pieces of glass were contained. So I just took the sock out, threw it in the trash, and washed everything, and
Yeah.
life went on.
Yeah. But it's important. Yeah. You need to think ahead on that kind of stuff. You need to think, how much weight am I allowed to take back with me?
Yeah.
And all of that. And shipping is not cheap from Europe, and whatever. So there's a lot to consider there. If that's your plan, is to bring stuff back, think ahead, think about your suitcase. Do you have a wine suitcase? Do you have this? Do you have stuff to wrap it in? You're not going to find bubble wrap in the stores in Belgium. So if you want that, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then one last big heavy question before we finish on an easy one. And you may have covered some of this already, but I'll ask you nonetheless. Why does good beer matter so much to you?
All right. This is going to sound a little weird, but
I like weird.
This is weird, but it's a little off. But I think in a small part of I don't know, some small part of it, beer is really the answer, part of the answer to world peace.
I'm with you. Explain.
Okay. Because if you think about it, beer and beer travel, people go to a bar, to a tasting room, to wherever on a tour to try beer, to try good beer, because the beer is what pulls them in. The beer is what pulls them in to be there. And then they're sitting there in another part of the world, and they're sitting down and they're talking to somebody sitting by them from somewhere totally different, and they realize, they're just like me, right? They're just like me, and they're making friends around the world. And they, why are we going at each other when we're really not this different? We're really underneath it all. We like the same things, and we're people, and so I think that beer is I've always said beer is a great connector. And, I think you have to have good beer to bring people in. And when you get people together, it's nothing better.
That's beautiful. And that is pretty much why I do this podcast, to help get rid of the us versus them problem in the world.
Awesome.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome.
So I appreciate your answer on that one. So anyone who wants to look you up, what is the website? Where can they go?
www.bonbeer.com, or bonbeervoyage.com. So B as in boy, O as in Oscar, N as in Nancy, beer like you drink.com.
Yeah. Awesome. And Ruth, you and I connected on LinkedIn. I think, I forget how that all began, but when I started looking at what you're doing, I just got really, really excited about it, because I think what you're doing is not only, let's just be honest, it's really, really cool. It's not terribly common, but I find, and given the answer you just gave, I think it's essential. I think it's one of those things where the ROI on this isn't as obvious as other things, but it is absolutely there and worthwhile and necessary. And I'm just grateful that you're doing it. And I'm grateful that you came onto this podcast to share it. So thank you.
Thank you. Right back at you, man.
Not everyone can easily travel abroad. For some, it's a bit of a luxury. But unlike other luxuries, travel is an investment in your experience and your lifelong perspective. No matter how far you can go, my wish for you is to just go and seek out your beer travel destination. In the next episode, we head to a culinary culture deep behind the lines of wine dominance to discover a craft beer culture on the rise. I'm on a virtual tour of the craft and culture of beer around the globe. I've put Good Beer Matters on video so I can take you along for the ride. If you know of a person, a place, or a beer story that needs to be told, let me know. Meanwhile, grab a beer, hang out with friends, and let your world open up. Thank you for listening. Cheers.